Greetings and welcome to the Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. We hope that you enjoy what you're about to see, and you can find us on the corner of Broadway and Church Streets at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. Or you can find us at bgmethodist.org and on Facebook at Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. So I'm not really sure when it happened, but at some point along the way, as I've been growing up and getting older, well, maybe I should just say getting older. I'm not sure that I've ever really grown up. But at some point along the way, I started to kind of maybe figure out a little bit that there is something to this faith thing, that there's a little bit more to it than what I knew before. Because I grew up in the church, so it wasn't that going to church was all that unusual. I mean, I wasn't a preacher's kid, but I was about as close as you could get. I was the music director's kid. I mean, we were up there for everything. I knew every single little nook and cranny in that church. I knew how from a very young age. In our nursery, we had a big toy closet in there that stayed locked most of the time. I didn't know where the key was, but I knew where the next best thing was, which is you walked into the kitchen right off of the nursery, and about the third drawer down was where they kept the little butter knives. You pulled out that butter knife, you walked back to the door, and just kind of jimmied it open a little bit, and then you had toys. It was good. It was always, half the kids in that church knew how to get into it. It wasn't really locked all that well, because we all knew how to get in that way. But I knew where everything was. I knew how to crawl underneath all of the pews in the sanctuary, and most of the time, well, some of the time, not even get caught doing it. Except for those times where I kind of misjudged where I was, and we had one big center section, and I come crawling out, I'd pop my head up underneath there, and there would be Dad sitting right next to where I just popped my head up out of there. Yeah, that did not go so well for me then. But I knew where all the Christmas decorations were stored, and even more importantly, I knew where they all went in the church, where the tree went, where the wreaths went, where all the little manger scenes went. I knew it all because that was just what we did. That's just where I was. And on Sunday mornings, I'd sit next to my grandparents. Sometimes I'd sit between them, my grandmother would be on this side of me, my grandpa would be on the other side, and half the time I think I was sitting there so Grandma could lean over halfway through the sermon and go, "Wake up your grandfather," because Grandpa would be asleep. He'd be just on that verge of starting to snore too, and Grandma knew it. So other times we'd sit in between, my grandparents would be on this side, and Betty and Russ would be on the other side. Betty and Russ were two of my grandparents' best friends. They'd known each other for 50 years or more, and they were like another set of grandparents for my little brother and I. They were another set of parents for my dad also, but especially for my little brother and I, they were like another set of grandparents. And I didn't know this at the time, but I didn't know it was called a coin purse. The little thing had the bank. She worked down at the bank, and so had a little bank name and address and telephone number on there. This was back before they put websites and email addresses on there, but they had that little zipper top on there. I didn't know that was a coin purse. I thought that's just where Betty kept her candy, because we'd sit down and she'd pull that out. And it was the best part of the service. When Betty would pull that, and then there would be little miniature Hershey bars or Mr. Good bars or the Crackle bars or sometimes Hershey Kisses. That was, for my little brother and I, that was great. That was the best part of church. But at some point I started thinking, well, there's supposed to be more to this, isn't there? There's supposed to be more than just kind of coming in and showing up on Sunday morning. And started to kind of get an idea of that in Sunday school when we were learning Bible stories and they finally began to stick and I began to remember the stories. It took a little while for me before I could do that part of it, but like, oh, well, maybe there's something a little bit more there. But then there was another part of that. At one point, I can't point it out on the calendar. I can't remember what the preacher was talking about that day. But I was sitting there probably in between my grandparents and Betty and Russ on the other side. Now, this would have been fairly early on because Betty passed away when right about either in elementary school or right when I went into middle school. Hers is the first funeral that I can ever remember going to as a kid. Russ just passed away just here a few years ago. He would still tell the story because he was at Pearl Harbor on December 7th. That's where he was stationed. And so he would tell that story, and up until, I've got a video that comes back up on December 7th of him doing a news story with one of the stations out of Kansas City, telling his story of kind of how that day unfolded. But we were sitting there in between them, and I had that thought to myself of, maybe there's something more that's supposed to be going on here. Maybe I'm missing, so maybe they're saying, it should be, we sit here every day or every Sunday, and this is like the most boring part of the service is listening to the preacher preach. I'm supposed to be getting more out of this. And so, as little kids do, we put our best thinking to this, and I thought to myself and said, well, I'll do this then. I will repeat every word that the preacher says in my head, and maybe that'll get me what I need to know. So I would do that with all the earnestness that any little kid can do, which meant it lasted about as long as my attention span did, that I would do that, but I would start off with the best of intentions every Sunday morning, and then I would repeat all the preacher's sermon in my head, as we go, or for at least as long as I could keep up before I get distracted. And so that was kind of where that started, and figured out there was something more there. Now, over the years, I've still misunderstood things. I've still done things kind of oddly at times. I have misheard and misspoke, and at times I've not always been very good at being a faithful person. But the one piece that has always grown over that time is this knowledge that there is something more to this faith that we're supposed to have. It's not just about going to church, but there is something more to all of this, because there is something that is different about the God that we gather to worship. Growing up, we never did talk too much about our faith at home, but that's because we didn't always necessarily have to, because I saw my parents live that faith out every day. We were up at the church for everything that would go on. Every time the doors were open, we were probably up there somewhere. But then I also saw that, the way they were at church wasn't any different than the way they were anyplace else that they went. That they were the same people that were trying to, as best they could, to live that faith out wherever they were. And we can see and we can know that there is something that is different about our God and the faith we have that, as time goes on, builds something up in us that says, this is different. This is more important than other things that are out there that compete for our attention or compete for our reverence. Our psalm this morning takes this truth that we see in this difference that we know that comes for our God and points it out in a way that maybe we aren't quite familiar with, but really gets at one of the key pieces that are so important for our faith. We go back and we look at verse 3 over here. There he broke the flashing arrows, the shields, and the swords, the weapons of war. It sounds a little bit strange when you stop and think about it. The psalmist is pointing out what he's saying is that God is stronger. No matter how strong we think that we are, God is stronger. These were folks that lived in a time where your nation, your people were judged on the strength of how they could wage war against their neighbors that were around them. And so their strength was, how strong are their arrows and shields and swords and other things? And yet, God is the one who breaks all of those things. Our God is stronger than the strongest thing that we can do. And the reminder is that God is not just stronger, but that's a good thing for us. That's not just a good thing for us, that's a good thing for everyone. We go back to the very beginning when God made us. God made us and he said, it's good. That's that refrain that comes out in Genesis 1 over and over and over again. God makes it and it's good. But because God made us and it's good, he also made us imperfect. He gave us the option to choose the better way. Because where we are weak and where we struggle, what gets us through is not relying on our own strength, because we know that will fail, but we rely on God's strength, whose strength is greater than anything that we can do on our own. What makes our God so different is that he doesn't expect our strength to carry the day. Like so many other things, the expectation is that we are pointed in a direction and we are expected to go and to do, and that we're expected to do that on our own with our own strength and make it happen. Our God looks at us and says, yes, I want you to go and I want you to do, but I know you probably aren't going to be able to do that on your own, so I am going to make sure that you have what you need. I'm going to give you some of my strength. And not just am I going to give you some of my strength, but I am going to go with you so that you aren't alone in going and doing this thing that I want you to do, going to this place where I want you to go. You take my strength with you, and I go with you. Look at verses 8 to 9. From heaven you pronounced judgment, and the land feared and was quiet. When you, God, rose up to judge, to save all the afflicted of the land. So often throughout Scripture we hear this idea of the fear of God. We're supposed to fear God. We're supposed to have this fear of God. And too often today we take that and we say, well, fear means being scared and afraid. It means being weak. Even it means being kind of meek and tiny. That those things that we are scared and afraid of, they are stronger than us. But here's the thing that is key about this passage. We get, and we're told to fear God. But the key part of this comes in this last bit, to save all the afflicted of the land. We remember that we're told before this that God is stronger than all of us. And the truth is that all of us are part of the afflicted. Because none of us are as strong as God is. None of us, in comparison, no matter how weak or how strong we are in this world, in comparison to God, we are all weak. We are all afflicted. And the good news is God says, I'm here to save, to help you overcome. The fear of God is good because it helps us to remember that ours is not the strength that we rely on, but we rely on God's strength. His strength is greater than all that we can do on our own. And that fear helps us to know that, to remember that, and to know where we draw our strength from, that it comes from God himself. None of us are perfect, and the fear of God recognizes that, and recognizes that it's through his strength that we find the right path, and that we can overcome what it is that's in front of us. Earlier this week I was asked if I was afraid of what might happen in church, based on what happened in Texas here just a couple weeks ago. And it took me a while to kind of figure out, how do I answer that? How do I respond to that? To that level of evil, to that caliber of evil. And so I thought about it, and I think I say, I'm not any more afraid of that than I am anywhere else. That when evil of that caliber happens in church, it gets more attention because church is the last place we expect that to happen. We think of it as being the safe place, the place that you can go where you don't have to worry about that. But even then, sometimes that evil happens. And what happens in response to that is that we get scared and we get afraid. And we then begin to put the focus on the things that we can fix to make the problem go away. And in light of that, over the last couple of weeks, I've seen all sorts of responses that people have made, been trying to tell churches, this is what you do, this is how you go about this. And I've seen everything from the idea to have a pistol-packing preacher, which, quite honestly, you don't want me carrying a gun. I'm not quite Barney Fife, but I'm pretty close. My foot is in more danger than anything else is if I am carrying a gun around. We've seen that to having armed security guards, and there is a lot of being afraid and scared and the wrong definition of fear that has taken root. Because that kind of evil is not limited to the church. In fact, church is still a good place to be. We are exposed to that same level of risk if we're at a movie theater or a restaurant or a large gathering of people. The fear of God says that we are all afflicted, but to remember where we draw our strength from. Psalm 76 is full of reminders that when we rely on our own strength, we will fail. When we rely on our own strength, we'll miss things. We'll put our attention in other places. But when we listen for God's voice, we hear that part of the solution is, yes, find what precautions make sense for us to take in this place, but to know that this is a very small part of a much larger problem. It's that fear of God, that listening to God, says that that problem is much bigger, and that as Christian people we are called to do something about it. To fear God, to let His strength guide us, so that maybe we can find a better way of overcoming that solution, of overcoming that problem. We remember and we know that there is something that is different about our God. That's why we have that fear of Him. Even if we don't always understand it, we can hold on to that truth that there is something different about Him, and that is what gives us our strength. As we go into this week for Thanksgiving, the first place we can stop and give our thanks is to give it to God Himself. And the best way that we can give Him our thanks and show Him our thanks is to let our fear of Him show, so that all can see His strength and know that that truth comes from Him. That it doesn't come from us, it doesn't come from other things, but that truth and that strength we can draw directly from Him. And so let us go this week, give thanks to God, and let Him guide us through all that we do, and know that His strength will guide the way, that He will show us the way, and that He doesn't just point to us and say, go and do this, but that He goes with us too. And then when we let that fear show, we can see a still better path in front of us, and that He is the one who will take us there. Let us go and do all of this in Christ's name.